Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go after the lefts, we go after the rights, we go after the middle and independents, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
Welcome, everybody, to How the Frack We Got Here. We're a podcast that's all about the news, keeping you informed, and apparently having a new intro. I'm host most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we do try to watch your language on this podcast, as well as there may be things that might be shown that may be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So let's go ahead and get into it. Besides the weird segue from the intro and all, but as we start this day of September 7th, 2020, September 17th, 2022, well, I'm kind of disappointed in the Democrats a little bit. Simple fact of the matter is, given their simple majority they've had with this congressional session, not a lot was done except the most recent events of the Inflation Reduction Act as far as getting the infrastructure bill passed and things of that nature. When it came to human rights, especially for Roe versus Wade, women having, complete autonomy over their own bodies and not having to worry about a man telling them what to do with their own bodies. Well, unfortunately, with that out the window, same-sex marriages are being pushed back to the back burner. And again, I don't get it. I truly don't.
Topic now, because Senate negotiators are making a big announcement right before we were coming on the air about a bill to protect the right to same-sex marriage, saying there will not be a vote on this. It won't be next week, as a lot of people thought. It's going to be after the midterms, coming just a few hours after we learned that the bipartisan group of senators seemed ready to release the text of the bill after hashing out a religious liberty amendment to try and get more Republican support. I want to bring in NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. So, Sahil, help us understand why they did this, right? Why they pushed it, why they're not moving forward next week, and is it more likely it'll pass after the midterms than before?
Well, Holly, this is Congress doing what it often does, which is punting an issue, trying to give themselves more time, simply to find the votes to pass this bill. Right now, you can count on a unified Democratic caucus, 50 votes there, but on the Republican side, you can count to 3, maybe 4 votes. They're nowhere close to 10 votes needed, to break a filibuster and pass this bill. And the calculation that Democrats are making is that they would rather get the bill passed and signed into law than to use this as a political cudgel to try to bludgeon Republicans with it in the midterm elections. So they vote now. The fear among some Democrats is that a number of Republicans aren't ready. They're trying to make some changes and write an amendment, to the bill that would ease the concerns about religious freedom that some Republican senators have. And they want more time to do that. If they vote now, some Republicans could be locked into their no votes and they might not be able to get this passed at all. The belief among Senator Tammy Baldwin, the Wisconsin Democrat, who is leading this effort, is that more time is what they need to make sure Republicans have that political space they need to vote for it. Senator Rob Portman, who is a Republican co-sponsor of this bill, has suggested that waiting would take the political sting out of a vote before the midterm elections, given that a lot of these Republicans would be going against what their conservative base wants. The final thing, Hallie, is that the nightmare scenario for Democrats is that they get neither. They get neither the political issue to use in the election, and if they wait until after, that Republicans are still not guaranteed to vote yes, that they could lose the political issue and they could potentially lose the victory. So it would be a gamble either way. But this is the path led by Tammy Baldwin the Democrats have chosen to take.
Okay, so for the simple fact of the matter, you're going to sit there. Democrats have a golden opportunity to at least save one particular freedom for same-sex marriages. And for the better lack of words, you guys are waiting for your jobs to be protected after the midterms to actually bring this up. Because say what you want about Democrats. Like I said, I consider myself progressive in all things, but that's what it sounds like. Do we want to give the Republicans time? No. You're trying to give whatever Republicans that are thinking about supporting this bill to make sure that they are elected and safe before they vote on same-sex marriages, actually codifying that, making that law. That sounds like the biggest cop-out I have ever heard. Because again, same-sex marriages, and I've said before on this podcast, if you thought Roe versus Wade was the end for the conservative leading Supreme Court, you would be highly mistaken. They'll go after same-sex marriages too. It's only a matter of time. But Democrats, instead of using this and saying, hey, we need to go ahead and get this on the books because you have potential voters out there, and saying that, oh, well, we won't really get to you until we make sure our jobs are covered. Because that's the thing. That's exactly what they're harping on. We want to make sure we're covered first before we actually take care of you. Now, if I'm a Democrat, if I was in that position, like I said, I'm in a straight relationship. But still, if I was in that situation, imagine being in a same-sex marriage or relationship, and you hear that the political party's needs comes first before the constituents. If I was, it would be hard pressed not to sit there and look at the person that you voted in and say, is this how all of you feel? Because I said it before, at the beginning of, actually, I've been saying since last year, Democrats are going to have a hard time convincing voters versus Republicans who are depending on idiocy and amnesia of their base to actually have them vote themselves back in. But Democrats, although have been given wonderful golden tickets, all Republicans came out pro-life and against abortion, which a lot of Republicans now are softening their stance, as we covered. They're not saying the whole thing about, well, it's God intended and it's protecting life and unborn children, because Republicans, some of them, are slowly realizing that, hey, we keep saying we're against abortion, not forgetting the fact that the largest turnout of our voter base is women. Democrats have known that, but now Democrats are making the same mistake Republicans are. That a lot of the LGBTQ plus community are also Democratic voters. And you just now told them that they can wait. You don't think that's not going to have any effect on them? It amazes me to say Republicans need more time. No, just say what it is. You want to protect your jobs. It is as simple as that. You want to protect your job. And once your job is protected, because that's the one thing about politicians, say what you want. They are more responsive in an election year than they are in a non-election year, because their jobs are being threatened. And when jobs are being threatened, either most people will either shape up and actually do what they're supposed to do, or most people will just be like, well, I've already gotten what I wanted out of this. Vote me out if you want to. But I don't get that about Democrats. I don't. Out of the one time I would sit there and point this out, because they were all too quick to point out that Republicans are against women's bodies. They're against women. They're against women's choices and control of their own body. Every Democrat had no problem out there toting that flag and saying, pointing to the other side and saying, they don't care about you. Yet now, when they have the perfect opportunity to go ahead and move this forward, we want to put the pause button on this till after November. I'm not an LGBTQ plus individual. I am an ally of them, but I can't really, but I would love, if you're watching this podcast, would definitely want your opinions on this. Just because the simple fact of the matter is, do you feel like this is a slap in the face? Or do you feel like, okay, I understand this is politics, we have to play the game? Because as an outsider looking in, it looks like a slap to the face to me. It does. It does. It's like, I would love to have your vote, but we'll address it after I'm back. We'll address it after my position's secured. Sounds like bullshit to me. But speaking on some good news, I will say this about Biden. Of all the strikes he avoided, this one was a big-ass bullet to dodge, because the train and railway workers who were scheduled to go on strike as of today, well, that strike was averted.
Has been reached between freight rail companies and the unions that represent tens of thousands of workers. President Biden said it took all night to reach a deal, preventing what could have been a devastating hit to the economy.
The rail system literally is the backbone of the nation. And people are now learning out of necessity about what a supply chain means. 2 years ago, people didn't know, nor should they know what a supply chain and all the consequences of the pandemic and the rest. But both business and labor, they work through this, they work through the supply, and it's just critical. They're keeping the economy moving. We got a way to go, but I want to thank them all, business and labor.
ABC News business reporter Alexis Christoforous and ABC News transportation producer Sam Sweeney join me now to talk more about this. Sam, I'm going to start with you. These workers were threatening to strike over what really seems like basic benefits for full-time employees. What exactly were the workers dealing with on a daily basis, and what did they ask for, and what did they get?
Well, Phil, they were, of course, asking for more money, but one of the sticking points was actually about scheduling. It's a complicated process to schedule these railroad workers, 60,000 of them in total in 2 unions, because they work several day shifts, and oftentimes they are scheduled just moments or hours before a shift. And what they were asking for was the ability to take off to go to a doctor's appointment or take their child to a doctor's appointment and not be penalized. They had a point system in place before, so every time they called out, despite not being paid, they still got a point. And if you got so many points, you then faced losing your job. And they were trying to negotiate new terms under this contract. In addition to a 24% raise, which they got, they will also get $1,000 a year bonuses. And this will be retroactive back to 2020.
Alexis, nearly a third of the freight in the U.S. moves by rail, second only to trucking. How would this strike have impacted the economy? I mean, we've been talking for days about how this would have had a massive impact on it, but really, what would it have done?
Yeah, Phil, I think I'm hearing the collective sigh of relief from our nation's retailers here, because had there been a strike, it could have been devastating for consumers and for businesses. You know, our supply chains are still recovering from all the turmoil caused by the pandemic. This would have just upended a lot of that progress, and it would have cost businesses more to get goods from point A to point B, and they would have most likely have passed those costs along to consumers who are already dealing with the highest inflation in 40 years. And I want to make a point that food in particular would have been impacted. So much of our food is transported via rail, and we know that food costs led inflation higher last month. And then outside of that, you've got millions of commuters who could have been impacted. People outside of the Northeast corridor may not have had a way to get to work. So this would have been a huge hardship, not only for American consumers, but for businesses.
Talk about the food. Yesterday, we were talking about the price of eggs up 40%. And
Good
then
memory,
this would,
Phil.
yeah, it was just yesterday. You go 2 days ago, I won't remember it. But yeah, I mean, that's 40%.
Yeah.
And then if this had happened, that was a real fear. Sam, how was this deal reached, if you know the details on it? And was it reached in any kind of unprecedented way?
I mean, this has been going on for months, since July. They were in a cooling off period, and that cooling off period ended Friday morning at midnight. The president stepped in the final hours last night, actually calling that negotiating room over the Department of Labor and saying, get a deal done. The consequences could be catastrophic, as we've been saying. It would hit farmers. It would hit all Americans across the country. As you said, 1/3 of all of this freight is moved by rail, and it would have sent prices soaring. Shelves would have been empty. And again, it would have been a disaster for farmers and, of course, our fuel prices. So the president said, get a deal done. The labor secretary worked for the last several days, and finally they were able to negotiate something early this morning.
Sam, it's a tentative deal. They're calling it a tentative deal. What happens next?
So over the next couple of weeks or even months, these union workers will vote on this tentative agreement. But in the meantime, they have agreed not to strike. So barring any unforeseen problems, they will go forward with a vote and approve it, and then they will get that contract. And again, that pay will be retroactive.
All right. And Alexis, while you are here, the business reporter, I want to talk about the overall health of the economy, right? When it comes to mortgages, retail sale, gas prices, you just talked about food, moving into, what is it, next week's Fed meeting?
Right.
So expected to raise interest rates yet again. We've been talking about inflation. We saw President Biden take a victory lap on the same day we got those inflation numbers.
Right.
So I think Americans are getting mixed signals, to say the least.
It's a good way to put it. I think we're all fatigued with all this talk of high inflation. There were 2 important data points out today. I'm going to give you the good news first. Retail sales unexpectedly rose 0.3% last month. And what I found interesting was it was moved higher by auto sales, even though it's more.
Okay, so let me stop right there because it's going into something else. So, as you guys saw, rail companies and unions, I keep saying this all the time, whether it's teachers, nurses, various other areas of labor. It amazes me so that even in 2022, we are now seeing the worker burnouts, constrictions, and things of that nature that businesses were putting their employees under. And the rail companies and unions that work for them were literally at the breaking points. It was like, like they explained, you couldn't take time off to go to the doctor, couldn't take time off to take your kid to go get seen, even though it's unpaid time. You're on your own dime, and you would have got penalized for it. Now, think about that for a second. Those railways, as they said, make up for quite the number of actual products moving across the U.S. If that were to be halted, yeah, I could see that doomsday apocalypse where shelves would be empty. Product would be sitting in freight yards or on trains. Because the fact of the matter is, people, the way that we actually solve this crisis has been being said since 2000s, really. That why is it in 2022 that federal minimum wage, some states have actually raised it. California actually raised it to $22 not too long ago. But the federal minimum wage is still $7.29 an hour. And you know what a lot of people have been saying for those that are going on strike? We want better pay, better working conditions, and we want to have other amenities added as well. But the two biggest things, pay and amenities. You just heard the railway workers will get a raise and we'll get a bump in pay. We'll get $1,000. We'll get $1,000 retroactively paid back to them. That's all people want. It's not that freaking hard. If you are a business owner, you have to pay your employees a wage to where they can live comfortably. I'm not saying that you got to pay them like kings, but you also can't pay them damn near working slave labor either. Like, you see a lot of these jobs out here that are still paying $8, $9, $10, $11 an hour. Where in the U.S., with the rising cost of renting and homes, are you going to find any apartment that you can pay that with your income? Because a lot of people understand this, that your rent or your mortgage used to take up a quarter of your income. Now it's taking up at least a third, if not half, if not more than half by now for a lot of people. Your rent or mortgage, when you take advantage of your income, it's almost damn near gone, if not gone. So I don't blame the rail workers for wanting to go ahead and go on strike. And that Biden and the Department and the Secretary of Labor had to step in, because when it comes down to it, these railways are privately owned. They're not owned by the government. These train yards, railways are actually owned by private businesses. And it's amazing to me that all this got done via unions. It would have not gotten done without a union. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is why I keep saying the whole entire time, unions work. Unions have always worked. And I always say, if a union is available for your profession, go be it. If there's not a union available, talk about forming one. Because that is the only way in the U.S. where salaries and profits in ratio to workers to CEO is nearly 495 to 1. 495, when I say 495 to 1, I mean 495 employees' salaries will equal up to one CEO. That is a overwhelming ratio of the salary gap. Really, truly is. But if you just pay people enough to where they can live comfortably and not have to stress out about trying to find another job or make ends meet or just making enough to go broke, we would not have these strikes. We would not have to have unions threaten strikes. When it comes down to it, simply put, pay people. That's it. Just pay people. Pay people, make sure they're taken care of, and watch how quickly your company grows. Because I'll put it this way, you don't see Publix in the news. You don't see Costco in the news. You don't see all these companies that their employees are treating their employees exactly how they should be treated, better and accommodated. You'll never hear about those. But you hear about Amazon and its major turnovers. You'll hear about Walmart, again, a company, $1 billion company, extremely exceptional major turnover. It's almost to the point now to where they literally added it to the budget. We're going to keep on being a meat grinder and hire as many people as we're firing or letting go. But when it comes down to it, you want employee retention? Easy. Pay people a comfortable wage to where they can work and basically make you more profit. That's how it used to work back then. If you look at some, especially with the steel and other trades workers, they have those unions. And again, nothing wrong with unions, nothing wrong with trade skills. They are highly needed, especially nowadays with the infrastructure in our country. Not to go off on a tangent, but the infrastructure in our country is woefully needing of upgrades and much less repair. Skilled trades are always wanted. But to bring this to a head, though, I'm glad we were able to avoid the strike. But I can also think about the fact that we're not too far away off from having another one. Because I usually say this, when it comes to the price of inflation, everything going up on your paycheck, for a lot of people, they are simply a paycheck away from being homeless. That is the reality. But moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this story as well, because again, we are talking about the midterm elections, and it is not certain that the Democrats, albeit they've had a lot of stuff go their way, a lot of things got passed. But again, we talk about, who do we want really leading the charge? If Democrats were somehow able to retain the House and retain the Senate, specifically in the House is the story I'm getting to, Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi was in the news saying that, if the Democrats were able to keep the House, would she still remain as the House Speaker? Which at this point she said that she didn't really answer the question. She did the political two-step. As far as saying that I'm not sure about that. Of course, if the Republicans won the House, then she wouldn't be the House Minority Speaker. She would be immediately removed. Here's what I'm saying about this, about Nancy Pelosi. Yes, she has served her term. Yes, she has done a lot of great things. But going forward, I don't think that she should be House Speaker. That's just my opinion. I don't think she should be House Speaker because she's too much of a centrist Democrat for me. She's too much. She really wasn't on board with canceling student loan debt. She wasn't on board with increasing minimum wage. She wasn't on board with having a wall between Wall Street and Congress. She wasn't on board with quite a number of things that made her seem more conservative than Democratic. And I have been saying this, that the House Speaker whoever is the House Speaker, if the Democrats do retain the House, it needs to be a progressive individual that is the House Speaker. I don't think Nancy Pelosi is it. I think that honestly Nancy Pelosi should retire. But then again, I'm also the same cat that sat there and said that the Senate and House, whether you're a representative of the House or whether you're a representative of the House or you're a senator, I do believe that you should be held to term limits, same as the president. Because you should not be able to serve, in my opinion, 10, 15, 20 plus years in the same position as a senator or as a representative. I don't think you should. I believe that if you're elected, you should get 2 consecutive terms. You can only serve 2 consecutive terms, but you have to sit out 1 if you're going to come back. That's just my opinion. I think if that was done, so many other things would be done in Congress. So many things. Because right now, for a lot of these senators and representatives, getting elected is, well, I won't say easy, but at the same time, they don't get a lot of opposition. They don't. But again, for Nancy Pelosi, if someone asked me, I wouldn't mind AOC. I wouldn't mind any of the squad to be the House Speaker. Because again, there should be a strong progressive voice that is leading the House of Representatives. And yes, I can see a lot of people say, well, you want to push a progressive agenda. We need a progressive agenda right now. And I'm not against it. But I do believe that Pelosi needs to take her curtain call and retire from Congress and politics altogether. Because let's be honest, when they retire from their positions, whether it be House or Senator, the next thing is book deal and political commentators on all your massive cable news networks. Tell me I'm wrong. But moving right along, guys, I did want to cover this story because Florida, the current king of the Hold My Beer Championships, Governor Ron DeSantis did the one thing that, I didn't expect him to do, but apparently when you're governor of Florida, you can do whatever you want. He decided to not only bus immigrants to different asylums, cities, he decided to go one step further, put immigrants on a plane to Martha's Vineyard because he quote unquote said, "We're not an asylum city." I cannot make this up.
November midterm elections, immigration emerging as the latest political flashpoint. This man is among some 50 migrants, including several children, who landed in Martha's Vineyard Thursday. When asked, he says he had no idea he was in Massachusetts. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on why he had them flown there.
We are not a sanctuary state. It's expensive if people are coming here. It taxes social services and all these other things.
This was just about a political stunt. There's nothing tough about using women and children for your own political gain. Ron DeSantis is a coward.
Hours later, more migrants arriving in Washington, D.C. Texas Governor Greg Abbott busing them to the vice president's home. Surprise arrivals forcing agencies in D.C. and Martha's Vineyard to scramble to assist.
They were extremely confused.
Since April, Texas has bused more than 8,000 migrants to D.C. and some 2,500 to New York City since early August.
This is a national responsibility. It should be a national burden.
California Governor Gavin Newsom tweeting that what the governors of Arizona, Florida, and Texas are doing isn't clever, it's cruel, and calling for the Justice Department to investigate these inhumane efforts to use kids as political pawns. President Biden challenging Republicans to help draft a bipartisan solution.
It's long overdue for Senate Republicans to come to the table, provide a pathway for citizenship for dreamers, those in temporary status, farm workers, and essential workers.
The U.S. is now on track to surpass 2 million crossings at the Mexico border this year. That's up from last year's near record 1.6 million. The White House saying it's working to fix a broken system and the legal process will take.
Okay, so again, it is amazing to me how Governor Ron DeSantis and Governor Greg Abbott, Texas and Florida, bust immigrants, flown immigrants. And Governor DeSantis is saying that we're not a sanctuary state. So you took it upon yourselves to put immigrants on a plane and fly them to Martha's Vineyard, a reasonably wealthy area, and expected what? You expected the residents to be appalled. You expected the residents to be outraged that in such a wealthy area as Martha's Vineyard that they're going to be disenfranchised by seeing immigrants there. They're actually helping them. They're getting them food, shelter, water, all the above. That actual community is actually helping immigrants. And the same thing is being done in Washington, D.C., also helping immigrants. But I think it's one step farther that, they would actually bus immigrants to the vice president's residence. This is the same group of people that not too long ago, when the Supreme Court ruled against Roe versus Wade, that they said that Supreme Court justices, mainly Kavanaugh, mainly Clarence Thomas, and the other ones that voted in favor of striking down Roe versus Wade. Keep in mind what I said, that during that time where everybody was protesting outside the Supreme Court justices' homes, it was only for those that voted down Roe versus Wade. Not everybody else got the same mob in the streets protest kind of feel to it. But Republicans came out of nowhere saying, we must protect our Supreme Court justice. How dare those folks protest? How dare those folks invade their security and privacy and things of that nature? Republicans were all over it. But now, 2 Republican governors have sat there and bust immigrants to areas and just said, oh, here you are. Good luck. It's a sanctuary city. They'll take care of you. Not one reprieve from Republicans saying this is extreme. Not one reprieve from Republicans saying this is going on too far. These are human lives. These are human beings, and they're being treated like livestock. Not one Republican has spoke out against what Governor DeSantis and Governor Greg Abbott have done. Speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the Republican Party? Speaks volumes how they look at immigrants and say, well, as long as you're not, well, again, apparently if you're not my gardener, or you're not my pool boy, or you're not taking care of if you're not taking care of my food, you're not my problem. But it amazes me so that, yes, even in 2022, we have so many things that are broken. We've had a broken immigration system. President Obama did try to initiate the Dreamers Act, where there was a path to citizenship. And it was, now granted, the Dream Act wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And Republicans shut it down because, again, it was a good idea to have, whether they, took a tour of armed duty and armed services or other things of that nature and basically became American citizens. We did have a somewhat of an idea in place and Republicans shut it down. But here's the thing about Republicans' immigration. They look at immigrants as exactly as Donald Trump said when he was doing his 2016 run, that they're murderers, that they're rapists, that they're all of this. And you have a whole bunch of people in his cult that have looked at and said, you know what? You're probably right. You're probably right. Why am I saying that now? That was 2016. It's 2022 now. Do you not think that what he said almost nearly 6 years ago does not have an effect on us now? Does not have an effect on society? The immigration in America, it's not like we're running out of room. Do you know how many states we have where the population is so low that I keep on saying this all the time? America has room. We're not crowded. At the same time, it amazes me that you have sanctuary cities and non-sanctuary cities, especially considering the fact how close Florida and Texas are to certain borders. You think they would take advantage of this, boost their numbers, boost their employment, boost their cities. You think they would take advantage of this. They don't. They would rather send them off to Florida. They would rather send them off to homes that they would drop them off at the steps of the Naval Observatory where the vice president lives and just say, good luck. But they're the same people that's going to sit there and say, well, this is going to mess up the economy. This is going to mess this up. But you use taxpayer funds for buses and airfare. Again, this is what we expect from the Republican Party when it comes to immigration. I don't expect them to have to come up with a plan. You know what their plan was? You know what the Republican plan was for immigration? Build a wall. Some of them still believe that a wall should be built. Even in Tennessee, where there are certain Republican candidates talking about, well, I'm going to get the wall built because, we have to protect our constituents. If people in Tennessee need to believe a wall needs to be built, I'm going to need them to check a U.S. map. Slight little problem between Mexico and Tennessee. That's all I'm saying. Slight. But again, we will follow these stories as it goes along. It's just the simple fact of the matter is immigration can be fixed. The thing about it is you have a certain group of people out there who are about as hung up as the new version of Little Mermaid will be the same people that'll be hung up about letting immigrants come in to a nation founded by immigrants that was supposed to be for all immigrants, but now to be for a selected few, because a few people believe that other immigrants that we do bring in are somehow non-immigrants that will fit right along with us. Figure that out. Moving right along, guys. Again, another story has came up, and you've probably seen this in the news, where a teen who killed her alleged rapist has to pay the family $150,000. And if you're wondering why the story sounds familiar, it's only because it'll hit you later on. A certain name with a similar story also spoke on this.
Piper Lewis, who killed her alleged rapist when she was 15 years old, is now being ordered to pay his family $150,000 in restitution, as well as serving 5 years probation. Iowa law requires the court to sentence offenders to pay at least that amount if they kill someone, regardless of the circumstances. A GoFundMe campaign set up by one of Lewis's former teachers is almost at $400,000. CNN's Lucy Kafanoff brings us the details, and we want to warn you, some of this information is rather disturbing.
Outrage is growing in the case of an Iowa teen sentenced to 5 years probation for killing her alleged rapist, ordered to pay the man's family $150,000.
The court is cognizant that you, and quite frankly, your supporters may be frustrated, even angry with the imposition of the $150,000 in restitution to Mr. Brooks's estate.
Piper Lewis was just 15 years old when she stabbed 37-year-old Zachary Brooks to death inside his Des Moines apartment in 2020, where she says he raped her multiple times.
Yeah, I wish the events that took place on June 1st, 2020 never occurred. But to say there's only one victim to this story is absurd.
Piper was being used for money or drugs by adults.
In her plea agreement, Lewis laid out the series of events that led to the killing, saying she was trafficked by an older man who forced her to have sex with other men for money, including Brooks. She described being assaulted repeatedly, including while being unconscious, stating, "I suddenly realized that Mr. Brooks had raped me yet again and was overcome with rage." Lewis was facing up to 20 years in prison after pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter and willful injury. The judge deferred those sentences on Tuesday, meaning her guilty plea could be expunged if she completes 5 years probation at a residential correctional facility.
So this is the second chance that you've asked for. You don't get a third. Understand that?
Yes, I do.
The next 5 years of your life will be full of rules that you will disagree with. I'm sure of it.
The judge said the restitution was mandatory under Iowa law.
This court has no discretion but to impose the $150,000 in restitution payable to Mr. Brooks' estate.
I don't think that justice was served. I think that justice would have not seen Piper Lewis spend any time behind bars.
Rights advocates point to numerous examples of victims of sexual abuse and trafficking facing punishment rather than protection.
Women of color who've experienced sexual violence, domestic violence, trafficking, any kind of harm, who act in self-defense against the people who harmed them, have not been treated well by our legal system historically.
That means I'm gonna die here.
Sarah Cruzan was sentenced to life without parole as a teenager for killing a man who sexually abused and trafficked her in 1994, pardoned by California's governor this July.
State of Wisconsin versus Crystal Kaiser.
In Wisconsin, Crystal Kaiser is facing a life sentence for killing the man she said forced her into trafficking when she was just 16. In Tennessee, Centoya Brown was sentenced to life in prison for killing a man she claims paid to rape her when she was a 16-year-old trafficking victim. She was eventually granted clemency and released in 2019 after 15 years behind bars.
You know, it's just a story that has unfortunately become all too familiar.
Reacting to Lewis's sentence in an interview with PBS NewsHour.
She was a victim in this situation. Not only is she going to have to serve time in a facility, but over the next 5 years, anything that she does can trigger her having to serve a 20-year sentence. So she's not truly free. And then there's the fact that she was ordered to.
Okay. So again, it's a story that's all too familiar. It's a story that's all too familiar. That first and foremost, it amazed me the level of like, well, how do we know that they're telling the truth? Who would lie about being raped, abused, and put in sex trafficking for what gain? We've heard multiple stories like this. That's why I say Cynthia Brown, especially in Tennessee, we all know it. At the same time, I'm just like this. I am more inclined to believe them because number one, I was like, if you really think about it, I'm more inclined to believe them because who's going to lie about being raped and putting in sex trafficking? Even more so, what's so crazy about it is that this court in Iowa says that this young lady is going to wind up paying $150K to the victim's family. And the judge is talking about, well, it's mandatory, but yet you deferred her guilty plea to a 5-year probation. Make that make sense. Here's my thing. First and foremost, if a woman was able to get away from her attacker or kill them or maim them in any way, I'm not going to hold that against them. I'm going to be like, what's the case? Case dismissed. Which it should have been this case. I don't think it should have been a guilty verdict because, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I don't think that it should have taken her because, of course, she pleaded guilty. She did admit that she killed him. But what I'm saying is there should be, what penalty is there? Oh, well, we're going to put you on a 5-year probation. For 5 years, you have to keep your nose clean and your record will be expunged. But for those 5 years, you have to sit with the fact that, for a lot of people are thinking, well, look at the choice they had. They can either constantly either continue to be raped, put in sex trafficking, be used as a plaything, or and eventually either wind up dead or worse, or kill that person and get free, and to still have their freedom compromised because of that. It is a effing raw deal as far as I'm concerned. Even more so that the judge is like, well, it's mandatory. We have to charge you. No, you don't. You could have sat there and said, we're going to put you on. If the judge was really being considerate, it really should have been a 30-day probation with a psychological evaluation, getting her the help that she needs and riding out 30 days. I would rather her ride out 30 days and be done with it versus the next 5 years, because Cynthia Brown had to be put on the same thing. And I just remember the whole thing with Cynthia Brown. Well, there should be justice for her. There should be justice for her. Where's the justice? Where's the justice for this young lady? Where's the cry out? Where's the support for that young lady? Although you did see a GoFundMe that they did talk about. So there is support there. But the point I'm making out of all this is it amazes me so how some judges will sit there and claim that, oh yeah, it's mandatory, this has to happen, versus, people like Brock Turner who don't even get a slap on the wrist. Make it make sense. That's all I'm saying. But moving right along, guys, I wanted to cover this story as well because I thought this was very interesting. That again, the New York Attorney General's office is reporting that Trump did try to propose a settlement that the New York AG attorney has rejected. Again, this is from New York. This is from the Manhattan Attorney General Letitia Owens, that's actually over this, that sat there and said that is currently investigating Trump because he might have actually been overstating the values of his assets for loan and fundamental gain. We're not surprised with this, that the New York Attorney General Letitia James is literally saying, "No, I'm not accepting that because there's possible fraud." And again, we already know there's fraud because Trump on previous tax returns almost 20 years ago wrote off $1 billion on his taxes. Billion with a B. New York Times actually found 20-year-old tax reports that were able to get a hold of tax reports that Trump claimed, and he lost nearly $1 billion in assets. But because he had daddy's money, he was still okay. But it amazed me so that Trump is now currently in New York being investigated by the same AG's office, and of course, pleading the fifth. And I would love to go back and get that video of where Trump sat there and said, if you're pleading the fifth, that means you're guilty of something. And right now, Trump isn't saying shit. Except that if indicted, there might be some issues. I'm sorry, but I know a threat when I hear one.
This morning, former President Trump declaring his innocence in the Mar-a-Lago documents case.
Well, I can't imagine being indicted. I've done nothing wrong.
And saying any indictment would not keep him from running for president.
I don't think the people of the United States would stand for it. And as you know, if a thing like that happened, I would have no prohibition against running.
Speaking on the Hugh Hewitt radio show, Trump said he does not expect to face any charges.
If it happened, I think you'd have problems in this country, the likes of which perhaps we've never seen before.
But when pressed, he would not elaborate on what problems. It comes as a judge yesterday denied the Justice Department's request for a partial stay in her ruling that limited their investigation into the more than 100 documents seized at Mar-a-Lago, documents marked as classified. The judge saying she's not willing to accept the DOJ's assertion that the documents taken were classified, and she demanded they be handed over to a special master for review. Trump claims he declassified the documents in question, and there are witnesses, though his attorneys have not argued that point.
I think it was other people also were there, but I have the absolute right to declassify. Absolute. A president has that absolute right.
A new poll from Fox News finds 65% of people surveyed believe Trump was wrong to take the documents. As for his possible 2024 bid for president, Trump says his supporters will stand behind him.
If you noticed, the poll numbers are the highest they've ever been. The people are not going to stand for this stuff. They've weaponized Department of Justice and FBI.
The Justice Department could appeal that latest decision in the Mar-a-Lago case, an issue that could go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Again, it amazed me so that Trump is going to sit there and say, well, the people are going to stand for it. The people are going to stand for it. And there may be problems if I'm indicted. Why does that sound like more of a cult leader than it does a politician? It is fairly obvious that Trump is doing everything he can to get to the end. He will litigate it. He will throw money at it. He will throw lawyers at it. He will appeal and reappeal until he realizes, until all options are exhausted. He will. Craig, I mean, I'm just saying, he'll exhaust all options. And again, at the same time, we're all wondering, well, not all of us are wondering, a lot of us are just watching the clock, because eventually it is going to come to a point. I do believe out of the multiple lawsuits that he's in, one is going to get him. And that one that's going to get him is his business dealings in Manhattan with New York Attorney General's office. I truly believe that is going to be the lawsuit that puts the nail in the coffin for his presidential bid. But it's amazing to me how Trump believes that he's done nothing wrong. As the president, I have the absolute right to declassify documents. No, you don't. You do not. I hate to break it to you, and this is the reason why I say Donald Trump needs to find, well, I should say, well, I shouldn't be surprised since his run as failure in chief. He didn't have anybody out there that actually read the Constitution. The president does not have the ability to declassify documents. Never has. In the same sense that you don't get to take documents home from the White House after your presidential run is over and you go back to being a private citizen. You don't got that right either. But again, I'm not surprised. But I also say this at the same time. What is it going to take to finally get this man? What is it finally going to take to put the nail in the coffin on Trump? I mean, because if you really think about it, anybody else would have been under the jail by now. But for some odd reason, Trump is the shining example of white privilege. Old, musty, mayo-crusted white privilege, but white privilege the same. But like I said, I think that lawsuit with the New York Attorney General's office is going to be the one that does him in. We'll follow that story as it comes along. Although he did really slick just threaten the fact that, oh, well, there might actually be a riot if I'm indicted. Again, co-leader making subtle threats because he knows he's already got followers out there that are willing to go to extreme measures to prove his point. Hard to say I'm wrong about that. Meanwhile, in Jackson, I guess we talked about this guy in Jackson, Mississippi, that they were having a water issue, and yet the boil notice. Now the boil advisory has been lifted. But I can understand from one resident what she's been saying about the water, which says a lot about southern states, infrastructure, and politicians, especially with the story that's following after this.
Nearly 7 weeks, a much-anticipated announcement.
We have restored clean water to the city of Jackson.
Governor Reeves lifting the boil water advisory and saying testing will continue.
It's very important that we set expectations up front. While we have restored water quality, this system is still imperfect.
This comes 2 weeks after deadly storms and flash flooding left Jackson without running water. The water pressure eventually returned, but was unsafe to drink. Where nearly a quarter of residents live in poverty and over 80% of the city's population is Black. And even after today, 55-year-old Deborah Bell is skeptical.
So even when Jackson officials say the boil water advisory is done, will you drink it?
Nope. Would you?
Bell says she hasn't drank Jackson's water for 15 years.
The water used to be brown looking, like my skin. It's not new. That water been filthy.
And the governor says problems found in a 2020 EPA investigation, including inoperable equipment and inadequate staffing, remain. Historian Dr. Robert Luckett saying there's an infrastructure crisis fueled by desegregation.
What you see happen immediately in Mississippi is massive and immediate white flight out of the city of Jackson. And as they leave the city, so too does their support for the infrastructure of the city and the water system.
And residents are now challenging their leaders to do more.
Do you feel local officials or even state officials have failed residents of Jackson?
I'm really all about looking forward.
Republican Senator Roger Wicker says the water crisis is a long-term problem that deserves more federal funding.
Solutions to the long-term problems in Jackson and other cities ought to be part of this supplemental request.
Though the water has now returned, Deborah remains skeptical that it will last.
What part hurts for you when it comes to this water crisis?
The people that might have died from it, the kids, it might affect your unborn child. Why they can't do nothing for the people that's here?
Earlier this week, the EPA's Inspector General announced a new inquiry into the city's water system. That investigation is ongoing.
Okay. It amazes me so that you guys have already heard me talk about this, that Jackson, Mississippi, Flint, Michigan, 7 other cities are being affected by water issues in the U.S., 7 major areas. And at the same time, that woman is right. I don't blame her for what she says. Do you trust the water? Do you trust the water? Nope. I mean, she sat there and said the water used to be as brown as her skin. And at the same time, we've seen what happens when flooding these systems, especially in southern states. Southern states, this is always going back to infrastructure. And it seems to affect southern states more than northern and Midwest and East-West states. That for the simple fact of the matter, guys, infrastructure is truly bad. Tennessee's no different. Tennessee may be one flash flood environmental hazard away from being in the same situation as Jackson, Mississippi. Just being honest. Because you know why? Because they have yet to address the infrastructure problem. Sure, Biden passed the bill for infrastructure, for bridges, roads, dams, things of that nature. But keep in mind, in Mississippi, which is by far the #1 most poverty-stricken state in the U.S., Mississippi, the same Mississippi that sent back money for rental and mortgage assistance payments, they sent that money back when people still needed it. The same state where Governor Tate had a water truck outside of his mansion while people were trying their hardest to get water bottles because the water there was unsafe to drink or use. The same Mississippi where if a politician was asked, did y'all believe that you failed the constituents of this city to ensure safe drinking water, and all he says is, well, all I can think about doing is moving forward. No, son bitch. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be sitting there saying, we didn't do what we were supposed to do. At the same time, and she's right. How many people got affected by this? How many people have been stricken by this, even passed away from this? It's just the point I'm making that just simple fact of the matter, guys, it's a lot. It's a lot to consider. I don't blame that woman at all because she sat there and said it herself. It's not safe to drink. I don't believe them. I don't trust them. It amazes me that in Jackson, Mississippi, as they pointed out, the majority of it's black. And yet it's poverty stricken. Says a lot about desegregation in the South. And again, them good old white hoods are somewhere. But that's only part of the story because they sat there and said, I wish we had the additional funding. I wish we had additional funding in Mississippi. Have you checked with Brett Favre?
Tonight, a new twist in the growing investigation into the misuse of government welfare funds in Mississippi, showing NFL Hall of Famer Brett Favre and the state's former governor might have been more deeply involved than first known. Text messages included in newly released court documents show Favre asked then-Governor Phil Bryant for help securing state money for a college volleyball facility where Favre's daughter played the sport, and Bryant sent him to the state welfare agency. Favre soon began texting with a nonprofit executive named Nancy New, who was doling out millions in federal funds sent to Mississippi for families in poverty. New has since pleaded guilty to fraud and is cooperating with prosecutors. After New was able to secure $4 million in welfare funds for the volleyball project, Favre texted, "Very big deal and can't thank you enough." 2 years later, Favre asked for more money. "Just left Brett Favre," Bryant texted New in 2019. "Can we help him with his project?" Text messages show New proposed paying Favre $1.1 million for radio ads. But the text show Favre was worried about how it might look. He wrote, "If you were to pay me, is there any way the media can find out where it came from and how much?" New replied no, but added, "I understand you being uneasy about that. It's all part of a broader welfare spending scandal that has led to an FBI investigation, though there is no indication Favre is under law enforcement scrutiny. He paid back the $1.1 million. Brad Pygott was hired by the state welfare agency to claw back $77 million that was misspent. But when Pygott demanded answers on the volleyball building, he was fired. The state agency says they weren't on the same page. We asked him tonight about the new text.
Mr. Favre all but badgered the governor of Mississippi to get this public money to his the purpose of building a volleyball facility.
We reached out tonight to Brett Favre's attorney, who told us Favre behaved honorably and never knew the state grants came from federal welfare money. A lawyer for former Governor Phil Bryant declined to comment on the texts and criticized their release.
All I can say is, well,
tonight in a
quiet you. All I can sit there and say, let me get this straight. The same state that is sending money back to help its constituents, that could have helped its constituents, the same state that could have used that money to repair infrastructure and actually get drinking waters to large cities, to their major cities, and actually, hopefully, would have actually increased public confidence in their abilities, is the same state that, along with Brett Favre, used the same funds to finance a facility because his daughter plays volleyball at the same college. You cannot make this up. At the same time, Brett Favre, well, I didn't know where the money was coming from, but you were worried how it would look. It amazed me, though. It amazed me how the city of Jackson, Mississippi, could not get the funding they needed to take care of their infrastructure till it was too late. Yet a former, in my opinion, former disgraced NFL quarterback has a direct line to the former governor and says, hey, where can I get the funds to get a new school built because my daughter's playing at this school? How else do you, only in the South. I'm pretty sure it probably happens other places, but only in the South does it have this level of soap opera storytelling at this point. I'm waiting for Days of Our Lives to come in at the moment. Because the simple fact of the matter is, guys, it makes no sense. But then again, I'm also in a state where they're considering a multi-billion-dollar Texas A&T Stadium-like area, and they say the same thing every year. They say the same thing every time on this project. Oh, it's going to bring in money. Oh, it's going to bring in jobs. Oh, it's going to bring in so many other things. And we have several other multimedia structures that were supposed to do the same and didn't occur. The point I'm making out of all this is, yes, when it comes, not just the federal government and people in place need to be looked at, it's also your state and local governments too. Because again, those with money, and Brett Favre has made plenty of money during his time in the NFL, could have turned around and probably financed that building himself. But realize, hey, let me go spend someone else's money instead of my own. I don't care where it comes from because I'm not going to be held, I'm not going to be left holding the bag. But in this case, you are. And it doesn't cease to amaze me that it's always been where money goes to those who have enough money to take care of their own problems, but they take it away from those who could benefit from it that don't have that same ability. That's fracked up. So I don't feel bad for Brett Favre. Honestly, in my opinion, if I'm going on a tangent, he should never be in the NFL Hall of Fame anyway. As great as he is. You think he would learn his lessons about text messages. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel-good segment, guys, because usually have the Frack guy here. We do cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we lose faith in humanity, but hey, it is the weekend. Hopefully sunny where you're at. So we do want to leave you guys out with some good vibrations, and I believe I found a story that'll do just that. About a teacher, and I love teachers. I have a very special place in my heart for educators. This teacher's dedication to ensuring literacy among kids is something that, it just needs to be shared. Because again, teachers, on a tangent, I know it's supposed to be a feel-good segment, teachers deserve a lot more than what they're getting, and what this man is doing is definitely impacting a lot of students.
In the great forest, a little elephant is born. His name is Babar. I've always been a bookworm. My favorite, Mike Mulligan and the Steam Shovel. I was a library kid. Books were my friends. Now this is my all-time favorite. He used his imagination to create anything he wanted. I certainly like the transformative experience of reading, of going into other worlds, experiencing other cultures. I am a high school English teacher where I currently teach. It's an incredible district with really, really talented kids, but it's a scrappy working class town. There is poverty. We have a high ESL population. So many of the kids are on free and reduced lunch. Their reading skills aren't where they should be by and large. In my 9th grade class, it's very typical to have kids reading at a 5th grade reading level. And if you're struggling with reading, you're going to be struggling with writing. I'd heard of food deserts, but I'd never heard of book deserts. And it occurred to me that I teach in a book desert. One day I asked one of my students, who was also a mom, "What are you reading to your child?" And she replied, "Mr. Abrams, I'm not reading to her. She's just a baby. She doesn't understand." And instead of lecturing my student, I decided to put out a call to all of my friends. Hey, I'm collecting baby board books. 1,000 books avalanched into my lap. I had more books than I knew what to do with. And I gave books away, and I just saw the joy in these children's faces. And then I got obsessed. And I then filled my classroom with books. And then my garage was filled with books. But then it got to the point where it simply wasn't sustainable. And that's when we got a nice donation to be able to move into the book bank.
One teacher donated, and we're going to pass it along to other teachers who need it.
We've outgrown our space, and we are now in the process of moving into 4,300 square feet in a nearby town. The name of my organization is Book Smiles. Book Smiles harvests, collects, sorts, and distributes hundreds of thousands of gently used children's books. What we do is irrigate book deserts.
Very good stuff. This was a great call.
We work to level that playing field. Why shouldn't every child have plenty of books in their home? We get donations from kind-hearted people, book people, people who believe every child should have a library of their own. I came up with the idea to paint trash cans to make them weather resistant, and that's the lure, that's the bait for people to come with their book donations and drop them in. When people donate books, they're all jumbled up. Sometimes we have grown-up books mixed in, and sometimes we have books that really do need to be recycled.
Ready for the trash.
And then we'll sort them according to age levels. And once they're sorted, we have a premium product in all of the boxes that we use. One of the most fun ways that the books are distributed are where teachers come to the book bank and they select through the books.
First grades, you'll probably want the picture books.
It's super important to help other teachers. Teachers get a small stipend to go and buy supplies, but all too often we have to spend hundreds of dollars of our own money to give kids a real quality learning environment. I hate it when teachers have to go online with their hat in their hand, begging for school supplies. That should not happen. And so if I can help them with books,
Thank you so much, Larry. You got it. Enjoy.
that's a beautiful thing.
How many? 45, that's it? Well, you'll come back for more, right?
And it's a feeding frenzy when teachers are able to walk away with 100 to 150 books that they take back to their classroom libraries and to students. It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet meets a used bookstore.
I teach juniors and seniors high school English. Our school building is over 100 years old. We have a space that used to be a library that hasn't existed for decades at this point.
Fresh ink. Take a bunch, yeah.
So 5 years ago, we started the library at my school. I took the lead, but I had plenty of help. The budget comes out of our own pockets. We're trying to be cost conscious. We're over 4,000 books now, and I'd say at least a third of those come from Book Smiles.
250, all right. Excellent. Glad you came.
The first time I showed up at Book Smiles, Larry was like, "We're going to fill your car up." And he was not exaggerating. I had no space left in my car. It is a game changer in just quantity and quality. I mean, the whole premise of how they operate is great. As a teacher, when the resources that you should have aren't there, this is the closest it comes to being able to provide what your students deserve and need to have.
Teachers are the best distributors of books that we have.
You guys getting everything you need? What district are you guys from?
In a lot of towns, we teachers are undervalued, but we really are a mighty force. We are an army. We used the pandemic to grow. We found opportunity in the pandemic to learn how to palletize books and to send them off to food banks. On any given month, the food bank will say, hey, we need 6,000 to 10,000 books. We will then assemble them on pallets and we will drive them to whatever facility needs them. And the books, of course, are free. So really, feeding the body is important, but also feeding the mind. Once we got our 16-foot box truck, I had to figure out how to drive the thing. I had to figure out how to use the lift gate, how to use pallet jacks, and it's been so much fun. I am proud to say that we have distributed nearly 1 million books. Books spread light. They spread joy, and that's why it's important for me to keep this thing going, because one light will light another light, and hopefully other people in America will start seeing that this is not rocket science, folks. This is just reclaiming used books and thinking of an efficient way to get them into the hands of children in need. We are just hitting the tip of this iceberg. There is so much work to do.
And again, that right there is the reason why I love teachers. That man and the group that he's with is just trying to make sure to spread the idea of literacy. And I said before, there have been multiple studies out there that say kids do better when they're reading books, academically, socially, above all boards. Same thing can be said for video games, but again, the reason why I love those teachers like that is because they truly do feel like it's their calling, and their impact will definitely be felt by many. But definitely wanted to give that man his time to shine. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. So I do thank everybody that liked, that watched, that let people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plug before I do get out of here, guys. As usual, I do want to shout out to my buddy Vaughn at BigBZA on all socials. David Vaughn Westman on Facebook. Definitely check him out as he usually does his TikTok things of what is BigBZA thinking. Little weird, but hey, he's family. I love him. But definitely check him out. BigBZA on all socials and David Vaughn Westman on Facebook. As for yours truly, guys, I can be found on all socials at BlockBox447. Definitely like me there, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat. Follow me there because I usually post everything, reviews on everything that I watch, and sometimes play and sometimes read. Also, gym stuff because I do a couple push-ups. At the same time, guys, I'm all about positivity, moving people forward, encouraging people to do their best. And I say this all the time. We need to be kinder to individuals. I'm not asking to be saints, but I'm only asking to be just pretty much decent, especially the brothers. Brothers out there, never be afraid to say hi to another black dude. It is completely fine. We need to check up on each other. And if you have friends or family, please check up on them, make sure they're all right, even including your strong friends. We are all fighting battles that nobody may know about by just simply checking on somebody and making sure they're okay. And we'll let them know that you were just checking on them, thinking about them. You might do a lot more than the last their day. You actually may save a life in the process. It takes zero energy to be nice. It takes everything in you to be a dick. So don't be a fucking dick. Simple as that. That also being said, guys, if you're going to be in areas with high traffic, please wear a mask. COVID, monkeypox, variants are still all out there. We are still in a pandemic area. Please protect others by protecting yourself first and foremost. If you are sick, please definitely stay at home. And, don't try to do what those other guys were doing on social, pretending you have monkeypox just to, to get clout. It's not cool. It's disrespectful. And at the same time, it's dangerous. That's all I'm saying. Also, the tracker you see at the bottom, guys, let me make that just a wee bit bigger. If you copy and paste that into your link, and your browser will take you to my link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. How the Frack we got here, Get Bit, and of course, the Offense Podcast. Definitely like and share and let people know about this as we try to grow these podcasts into something bigger and greater. And at the same time, help brother out. That's all I ask. Before I do get out of here, guys, I do want to sit there and say the last thing. I said the last thing. The last thing about how the Frack Guide is all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allowing you to make up your own mind. But we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. When we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we must learn from it and be progressive. When we're progressive, we right our wrongs. We basically elect, for example, our first Black woman Supreme Court, our first Black woman the Federal Board of Governors. We just appointed not so long ago our first Black 4-star military general into the armed forces. Again, when we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go up with your paycheck? Why are we letting different politicians still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Again, let me know your comments on everything that we discussed today. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we will all